It's great to be with everybody. I love doing these worldwide broadcasts. I was always interested in inventing things. I was born with a big curiosity, I think. And even when I was a kid, I used to try to figure out how things worked. I'd take them apart. Sometimes I'd put them back together, but often in a different way. See if I could improvise, some innovation. So I've been a big believer in hands-on learning my whole life. And if you think about entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs are people who are compelled to do hands-on learning and to be a hands-on person, because when you start a company, you've got to perform so many different tasks. You have so many hats to wear. I also remember when I was at Apple, Steve Jobs didn't believe in typical business titles. I was the CEO, but he was the chairman, so those were our official titles. But the titles we actually used just within our Apple, Steve said, well, let's make up our own titles. So I made up my title and I said, I want to be chief listener, because I've always felt that in leadership, a big part of leadership is being a good listener. So two sort of building blocks in my career have been hands-on learning. Everything is hands-on. The other is to be a good listener. During my life, I was raised in Bermuda, mostly in the summertime. I was sent away to a boarding school, which was a typical English thing to do if you came from a small island. Bermuda was a British colony. And I learned so much, particularly hands-on, from my grandfather, who was a marine engineer. And we talked about inventing everything from how do we, could we distill fresh water from salt water, because we were a little island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And the only water we had to consume there was rainwater that was collected off the roofs of the house and stored in a cistern below the house. When I got into business, one of the first jobs I had was at Pepsi, and I was made a driver salesman, which meant I drove a truck, delivered soft drinks. At nighttime, I was given the job of resetting shelves in supermarkets. I remember one of the markets I trained in was Phoenix, Arizona, which gets very hot in the middle of summertime. And in order to get Pepsi signs up in little stores, bodegas, they'd make us do other things like repair the roof of their store. So we would be up working in incredibly hot temperatures with the sun reflecting off the tin roofs. And we would have a bucket of water, and we would put handkerchiefs on our wrists and our other pressure points like our neck and our forehead, just so we didn't pass out. So all my friends said, why would you take a job like that? Because I had an MBA from the Wharton Business School. And I said, because I believe in hands-on learning. And I said, I want to learn. I want to see it firsthand and get my hands on it. And that experience was so valuable to me, because when I eventually got the chance to become marketing vice president of Pepsi, which happened when I was just turning 30 years of age, the reason I was able to succeed was I had a mental picture in my head, what happened throughout the whole process of being somebody who made soft drinks and delivered those soft drinks and displayed those soft drinks. And a lot of the marketing programs we came up with, which were successful at Pepsi, were things that I had gained a perspective on back in those early days of being a trainee. So with that, why don't we go to the questions you'd like to ask, Mark?
Yes, and I'm gonna hand it off. You guys, this is Dr. Mark Sullivan. Some of you guys know him here. He is our professor friend at Ohio State's Fisher College of Business. So Mark, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks so much, Ralph. And of course, it is absolutely such a thrill and privilege to have the Mr. John Sculley here. He has asked us to just call him John, but he is, as you all know, he has just a phenomenal background. We're here, John, in part to learn a little bit more about what leadership is all about. And so we had three quick questions for your consideration. The first one really is that since leadership is hard work, what was it like when you got to Apple? What did you find? And what were the early actions and decisions did you have to consider to get things moving in a more productive direction?
So I first met Steve Jobs 39 years ago, and that was the early days of Silicon Valley. That was in the early days of personal computers. In fact, most people didn't even know what a personal computer was back in that era. And so when I was recruited to Apple, it was at a time when Steve Jobs was only 26 years old, and he was the chairman of the board of Apple. And he wanted to be the CEO himself, but the board didn't think he was ready for it. He was obviously brilliant. No one questioned his brilliance, but he was not yet experienced at leadership. So I was recruited to Apple because the original product that launched Apple, the Apple II, which at that point was several years old, was losing market share to competitive products. One called Commodore, which was a game machine that eventually became an early personal computer, and another one was called Atari, which was a game machine that became a personal computer. And they were now outselling the first Apple II by 2-1. And IBM was just introducing their own personal computer. And so the only cash flow, the only profitability for Apple at that time that I was recruited was from the Apple II. And Apple had tried to introduce follow-on products to the Apple II. They introduced the Apple III, and it failed. And so the first thing they needed me to come and do, because I didn't know much about computers at that time, was to turn around the sales and profitability of the original Apple II, while Steve Jobs could spend his time creating the first graphics-based personal computer called the Macintosh. And so Steve wanted me to teach him about consumer marketing because he believed that this would be a direct-to-consumer product, the Macintosh. And it would be entirely different than any computer that had ever been built before, because his belief was that the future of computing 39 years ago was going to be for non-technical people, for consumers who didn't know anything about computers, didn't even know they needed a personal computer, but he was going to make the Macintosh so easy to use, using graphics like pull down menus and copy, cut, and paste, and these various things that we take for granted with a personal computer, but they didn't exist before the Macintosh. And so he believed that by making a product that was really easy to use and you could do creative things, that non-technical people would want to have it. But he wanted to know how to market it. And so my background was I had been the CEO of Pepsi before I came to Apple. And when I became the marketing VP of Pepsi, Pepsi was outsold 10-1 by Coca-Cola in 50% of the US. By the time I left, Pepsi was the #1 consumer packaged good in America, and it outsold Coca-Cola, as a packaged good. So Steve was interested in my marketing experience. The board of directors was interested in, could I turn around the sales of the Apple II? Because if we couldn't, Apple would go bankrupt.
So John, that was really very, very helpful background for our next question, our second of 3 questions, which really is that leadership has consequences. So, and I've heard amongst others from Apple that you were brought in as part of a rescue mission, if you will, kind of inferentially supporting what you were just saying. So the question is, if you weren't there to say, right the ship, the Apple ship, what would have happened to this organization without your leadership?
Well, I think that if they didn't hire me, they probably would have hired somebody else who would come in and been able to help them. So it wasn't magical what I did. It was just kind of based on my experience selling what became the largest selling consumer packaged good in the United States, and competing against what was then the largest, most successful consumer brand in the world, Coca-Cola, that I had that particular experience at a time when Apple wanted to go from being a product that had been created by really brilliant technologists, really brilliant engineers, but they did not have, because there was no consumer marketing in those days in Silicon Valley, they didn't have the experience that I had in consumer marketing. So I think it was an advantage I had, but going into an industry where people were highly skeptical whether I was the right choice. They said, why would a Silicon Valley company, which is mostly a valley of engineers, want to hire a consumer marketing person from the soft drink industry? It didn't make a lot of sense to a lot of people. It turned out that I had been a ham radio operator, amateur radio operator, since I was age 13. And I had actually done a lot of work on my own in consumer electronics. I invented the cathode ray tube, which was for color television back when I was 14. And so I had learn by myself. I was not a trained engineer, how to do consumer electronics back in my teenage years. But in my era in Silicon Valley, so many of the really successful leaders in Silicon Valley didn't finish college. They had dropped out of college. Bill Gates dropped out of college. Steve Jobs dropped out of college. Steve Wozniak dropped out of college. Larry Ellison, who started Oracle, dropped out of college. Why did they drop out of college? Because at that time, colleges and universities weren't teaching anything that was relevant to what you needed to do to be able to build digital technology products.
Great. Well, thank you, John. You know, it really bespeaks of our third theme and question, you know, as someone who is been committed to lifelong learning, doing kind of mantra. This third final question is really about leadership as growth, whether it be growth of products or growth of revenue or growth of people. So personally, John, you know, how did your experiences as a leader at Pepsi and Apple influence the kind of person you were going forward post Apple?
Well, I long thought, and this goes back to my Pepsi days, that perception leads reality. When we were going up against what was then the most valuable consumer brand in the world, Coca-Cola, that Coca-Cola was the reality. Why would anyone who wanted a soft drink want to drink anything other than a Coca-Cola? It dominated the soft drink industry. And so at Pepsi, we had to come up with a different perception, because if we played by the ground rules that Coca-Cola had, they would win. They had more resources. They had the equity of their well-established brand. So we came up with a perception, which we called the Pepsi Challenge. And the challenge was, we had learned in our own taste testing that when you put a Pepsi and a Coke just in a glass, so people couldn't tell which was which, there was no brand identification, that actually the taste of Pepsi was slightly preferred over the taste of Coke. But as soon as you put the brand on the two and they saw which was Coke and which was Pepsi, everybody almost always picked Coca-Cola. So we came up with this perception marketing concept that we would run taste tests, and we would do them in shopping centers. We would do them at sports events. We would do them outside of supermarkets, and we'd have set up a card table, and we'd say, take the Pepsi challenge, you know, and we'd let someone try one drink and then try the other, but not tell them which was which, and then let them be surprised what they picked. What was always powerful was when a long time, very loyal Coke drinker who had never had a Pepsi in their life, you know, the reveal was that the beverage that they picked in the taste test wasn't Coca-Cola, was Pepsi. And we made television commercials of that. And it just drove Coca-Cola crazy. And the more angry Coke got, the more publicity we got. And it became a campaign where in the markets where we were outsold 10-1, we eventually ended up outselling Coke. So it was a very powerful campaign. And you also have to be willing to take chances, to do things that are unexpected. So when I was a driver salesman at Pepsi, I realized that the market is really driven by people who drink a lot of soft drinks every day. They're called the heavy users. And so when I became head of marketing, we ran a blind taste test study, and we would deliver soft drinks to people every week. And then we would come back the following week to find out what they consumed. And we did this week after week after week. And we found something that we never had expected when we designed this market research. We discovered that no matter how much people bought the prior week, when we came back the next week to deliver more soft drinks to them, whatever they wanted to choose, the household inventory was always empty. So we said, wow, that's pretty amazing. If we can just get it to be easier for people to have more liquid containers, more liquid in their containers for soft drinks, they're undoubtedly going to consume it. So we were the first to create the 2-liter plastic bottle. At that time, soft drinks were sold in very small bottles, in ounces. That would be a 6.5 ounce, 8 ounce bottle, very, very tiny, 100 milliliter bottles. And yet we came out with these jumbo size bottles that were made out of plastic, so they weren't overly heavy. And since I had worked as a driver salesman, I knew what it was like to be able to have display equipment in supermarkets, and that we had to design new display equipment that could accommodate these larger bottles. And we did all of those things. And the result was we were out with the 2-liter bottle for Pepsi almost 3 years ahead of Coca-Cola, before Coke woke up and discovered how successful we were with these 2-liter bottles. So the combination of the Pepsi challenge and the 2-liter bottle were powerful reasons why Pepsi ended up outselling Coke and became the largest selling consumer packaged good in America. And it's an example of the leadership that you do in terms of doing things that are out of the box, things that aren't expected, redefine the things that you can have control over, which your competitor may not have dominated prior to that. And the same thing that worked in soft drinks, we discovered worked in Apple computers. So we did it we started with a program when we launched the first Macintosh. It was called Test Drive a Mac. And you could go to your local dealer and they would loan you a loaner of a Macintosh computer, and you could take it home and try it. And if you didn't want it, you could bring it back and no charge. But so many people said, wow, this is such an amazing thing. How can I buy it? And then we would set up a buying program where they could pay for it over time. So many of the consumer techniques that we had learned in other consumer products were very transferable over to high-tech products at a time when there really was no consumer marketing for high-tech products. We're now 38 years ago.
Wow. Terrific, John. Just very, very exciting to really hear you not only speak to the incredible impact that the Cola Wars and your Pepsi challenge had in this country, but also how you really summarize some really key points here today about the value of learning, about experimenting based on curiosity and creativity, about taking chances, about creating a new reality by challenging yourself and challenging others. Really great points about a great leader such as yourself. So I'm now going to pass it off to Ralph Krause, who I believe will be facilitating some of the Q&A with our students.
Absolutely.
So John, how about if we give John just right now a great round of applause.
We'll give him a hand at the very end, because there comes, it's a double-edged sword when you unmute all, when you have 300 participants.
Okay, all right, good. Okay, so without further ado, let me hand it off to Ralph. Thank you, John, so much. Ralph will manage the Q&A with the students. Thank you.
Absolutely, and we have Bianca in France had an awesome question for John. So Bianca, you should be able to unmute and go ahead and ask your question.
Well, I'm honored to meet you. I was wondering about, as you worked in company that revolutionized marketing, how would you conceive a good marketing campaign? Sorry.
Well, I think the best marketing campaigns, Bianca, are ones that puts the customer first. Uh, so many industries have been revolutionized by digital technologies because they've been so transformational that they can reshape entire industries. As an example, if you look at the ability to buy products today, particularly during the pandemic that we're all going through around the world, it used to be many products you had to go to a retail shop in order to see it and buy it. But today we do things online more and more. Online commerce has grown over 100% during the pandemic. So it's an example of how you can use the techniques of digital marketing to be able to build a personal relationship with a customer that bypasses a lot of the traditional ways of doing things. So many businesses have discovered during the pandemic that by using digital brand marketing, they're able to customize offers for people, even though they're dealing with people that they can't physically see. They are able to come up with recurring revenue. The most important thing when you're building a consumer business is to build a loyalty with a customer so they'll come back again and again and again, because the cost of consumer marketing is very high. So if you only get one sale from that marketing, it's hard to make a profit. But if you can get a loyalty with that customer by what you do with your online relationship and build a relationship with someone online, hopefully you can get them to come back again and even again and again. And so digital marketing has kind of changed the game of how we used to think about retail marketing. Digital marketing now puts a big emphasis on giving incentives to people who buy online. A good example of this that if you buy online, we'll deliver the product for free, or we will deliver that product in one day. Or in some cases, some companies will say, you buy this product, we'll deliver it for free in 2 hours. So you say, and maybe let's say it's an apparel product. So someone says, well, what if I get that apparel product and when I get it home, it isn't what I really wanted? Well, a lot of companies say, well, try it on. If you don't like it, send it back. Some people even order shoes online, and they'll order several different shoes in different colors. And that's okay, because if they send back the ones they don't want, the shoe company still gets the sale of the one that you purchased. And so we're seeing that what is a brand is very different than the days when I worked at Pepsi, which was essentially you say, here's a brand, which is the identity, so people can remember what you're selling. And so you promote the name of the brand, Pepsi, Coke, whatever the products happen to be. But now brand is more than that. Brand is the experience of looking at products, choosing products, getting products sent to you. You try on, if it's an apparel product or a shoe, what you want, send back the others. So the brand is the whole experience of, are you happy with the service that you got from the company? Not just, are you happy with the product itself? So this is the amazing world we live in now with digital marketing, that there's so many ways we can engage with the customer. And so you always hear customer first.
We have an awesome follow-up question from one of our kids in Italy. Mev, you should be able to unmute and ask your awesome question.
Thank you, Ralph. Nice to meet you, Mr. Sculley.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nowadays, all we want is novelty, new discoveries, new inventions, and new ideas. How do you build something new that will never get old in entrepreneurship?
Well, I think we live in an era where change is constant. And that is a foundational fact that change will always be there. And it's why the era we live in now is so advantageous for entrepreneurs, because there would be no reason for an entrepreneur to even be in business if a bigger company that had far more resources, far greater power in the distribution channels, had money to spend on marketing and sales or product development. If it was just a matter of sheer resources, the big companies would always win. And yet we see now that certainly in my own country, the United States, the growth driver in the economy are the innovations that are coming from entrepreneurs. And what do entrepreneurs do? They ask a question. It's the same question we used to ask ourselves when I was at Apple. There has to be a better way. There has to be a better way. And so you look at things, you say, well, why are things that way? As I said, I was always a curious kid. I was always asking, well, that's interesting of how something worked, or how brands were determined in a particular industry. But wasn't there a better way that you could do things? And now, particularly at a time when technology gives us new considerations of possible better ways to do things. So a better way, example I gave a few moments ago, where I said, now we can actually talk remotely to people using digital marketing, and we can offer them a wide range of choice, and they can try products, and if they don't like them, they can buy the one they do like and send back the others, or we can deliver products to people much faster than a competitor service. So all of those things become part of the tools that we have, and it gives you the flexibility to do things in different ways. So I would say that open your mind to your own creative ideas. Now remember, not everybody has to be an entrepreneur who starts a company. And not everybody wants to do that, because there's high risk in being an entrepreneur. I happen to love risk. I've always lived in high risk situations, but many people don't want risk. They would rather work for a company that's already established and perform a really good role in those companies. So it takes different people with different skills in companies at different points of time. My favorite time in companies is in the early days, when the company is shaping its vision, and the types of people it recruits are people who are risk takers. But in the culture in my country, people can make mistakes and still come back and try again. So in Silicon Valley, we always say, gee, you made a mistake, you must have failed. We always say, you made a mistake, so what did you learn? And what you learn is so important.
That is actually one of my favorite quotes. Ironically, you're the one who said it, but those who take the risks are the ones you'll lose against. And I love it. I love it. So we'll go with one more student question, and then we'll let you go, because I know you have a very small amount of time, but the recording of this, we'll release it on our social media feeds and stuff like that later in the week. But here is Robert. He is one of the students in Ohio. Robert, you should be able to unmute and ask your awesome question.
Awesome. Thanks, Ralph. And thanks, John, for taking the time to answer this. My question is in regards, it's actually due to the current situation of the world. So obviously we've been going through this pandemic. One positive thing is the vaccine. And I was curious on your opinion, with your experience at such large companies, how do you view corporate responsibility, and kind of gauge how much private firms should be assisting in the deployment of the vaccine, perhaps?
Well, that's a wonderful question, Robert. And I think that private firms, in my opinion, do have responsibilities that go beyond just making money. But if you are serving the market and you're making money from serving the market with your products or services, then I think you have a responsibility back to the community that is being loyal to your products or services, to be able to do other things that may be helpful, particularly in time of crisis. So one of the things which I believe is important, and I see that in our own country, is that when you can get partnerships between the public sector, meaning government, and the private sector, meaning companies, it can often be the best possible solutions. So let's take the example of the vaccines. So the vaccines were created for COVID-19 by private companies, but they couldn't have done it as quickly as it was done, in less than a year, without the support of the government to grant monies to enable them to do a lot of things, because it's not just inventing the vaccine, but it's testing that vaccine, which with tens and tens of thousands of people. And that takes time, and it takes cooperation between the public sector and the private sector. When you actually get a vaccine, which you say, yes, it meets our test objectives, and if we've been fortunate that several of the vaccines for COVID-19 do that extremely well, then the question is, how do you deploy it? So the deploying of the vaccine is really largely a responsibility of the federal government. In the US, we have, it's more complicated because we have certain roles done by the federal government and certain roles that are done by the state and local governments. But what we do know is that the government, while they can put in large amounts of money to guarantee that large amounts of vaccine can be bought by the government. Remember, we don't charge anybody in the United States for the vaccines. It's free to everybody. So how does that get done? Well, we're now learning that you really need the private sector. For example, companies like Amazon in the United States, they're experts at logistics. They can be extremely helpful to say, how do you get the vaccine to more and more people? We have large pharmacy chains here. CVS is one, Walgreens is another. Both of those organizations, private companies, have said, look, we think we could do a very good job to accelerate the number of people who are going to be vaccinated with these vaccines. And so now there is cooperation between private companies working with governments, in this case, working with the individual states. So the more we can get cooperation between public and private, I think you're going to find that private companies want to participate. Yeah, even if they don't make any money, they want to participate to help make the world better and the communities more successful and getting more people vaccinated. So this pandemic, yes, it's been tragic by the large number of people who have died from COVID-19. But on the other hand, we're now starting to see some wonderful stories where private companies have stepped in and say, how can we help? Particularly in the deployment of getting people vaccinated, at the local level, the community level.
So before we let you go, one last thing. As these kids kind of go off into their world and discover what they want to do in their lives, as someone arguably who is a titan of industry in multiple industries, what kind of advice would you give to these kids as they kind of figure out what they want to do in life?
Well, first, I would say that the majority of what I've learned in life, I've learned through experience, hands-on experience. So yes, there are things you have to do in school, and you want to do them well. And more, we hear the importance of STEM classes. So for example, science, technology, engineering, and math are all kind of foundational, even if you're never going to become an engineer or a scientist. It's just good foundation to have. You can do that at the high school level, or even start at the middle school level, or you can do it at the university level. But the majority of what you are going to learn and be able to apply is going to come from your experience after you graduate. The most important thing I think that I learned in school was how to learn, because it wasn't obvious to me when I was a student. I was just kind of an average student when I was in middle school. I actually was a big stutterer. I stuttered, and I was very embarrassed by the fact that I couldn't speak very well to any number of people in a group. So I was embarrassed, and I was just kind of an average student. But then I said, I'm not going to have my life held back because of this speech impediment, I'm going to overcome it. And so I worked very, very hard to get over my stuttering. And when I got to university, by then I was over my stuttering, I really took my studies seriously, and I became a very good student. And I took very tough, challenging courses. And then when I got out of school, I said, I'm going to take the thing that was a big obstacle for my early life, and I'm going to make it a strength in my life going forward. And so I do a lot of public speaking. I do a lot of television. And I couldn't have imagined back when I was 15 years old that I could ever stand up in front of a class and even talk to my fellow students. And yet today, what was an impediment and could have sent my life in an entirely different direction has actually become something that's enabled me to be involved with people like all of you and to keep my mind alert. So even as you grow older, you find that lifelong learning never stops. It goes on and on and on. So I'm up early in the morning. It's usually 5:30 in the morning. I'm on my computer. I'm looking up what's happening in science and what's happening in biology and what's happening in technology and what's happening in all kinds of things around the world, because I want to keep my mind active and alert. And so I work with many different businesses. I have a business in biotechnology where we're working on cancer cures. I have a business where we're doing all kinds of diagnostic technology, from detecting early breast cancer months before it could be done with a mammograph, so that you could save many people's lives if you detect breast cancer early enough, to helping diabetics, being able to do non-invasive blood glucose monitoring every day, which is critical to their lives, to doing things in consumer marketing. I was just working this morning on a business we have where we're coming up with an entirely new way to automate the way that you market products online using video automation. And the technology, the idea came from Silicon Valley, but all of our work is being done in India. So we're in Mumbai, we're in Bangalore, places like that with our teams. And that's an example of how work can be done almost anywhere in this world. And those ideas are so different than what was possible when I first got out of school. So you have to keep your mind open. You must have that curiosity that follows you through your whole life.